Hello everyone. In today's lesson, we are going to talk about how an animal cell is like a cell phone. And in order to do this, we are going to use an analogy to explain the organelles in a eukaryotic cell. What this means is we are going to use something that you don't know very much about, the animal cell, and compare it to something you are very familiar with, your cell phone, to give you an idea about how all the organelles in the eukaryotic cell work. So for each of the organelles, I'll introduce them. I'll give you a little hand motion to remember them. I'll talk about what they do, and I'll compare them to something in the cell phone. So the first thing we have is the cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane. And this is my hand motion for cell membrane. Cell membrane. And this controls what comes in and out of the cell. It's kind of like the security guard of the cell and can prevent bad things from getting in and also keep what's supposed to stay in the cell inside the cell. So this is kind of like the password protection on your cell phone. It keeps out people who don't know the password. Those are people you wouldn't want using your phone. So the cell membrane controls what comes in and out of the cell. Next up, we have the cytoskeleton, and this is my move for the cytoskeleton. This gives us a little bit of a rigid protection and shape to the cell. So that's why I have my cytoskeleton move. And this you can think of kind of like your cell phone case, which is the protection for the outside of your phone. A lot of us don't just walk around with our phone by itself because it needs to be protected, and the cytoskeleton protects the cell in the same way your cell phone case protects your cell phone. Next up, we have the cytoplasm, and this is the move for the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is a jelly-like fluid in the cell that holds all of the organelles in place. This is similar to something in your cell phone called the cell phone motherboard. And you may not really know this exists, but if you open up your cell phone, obviously there's a lot of chips and small parts that need to all function together. And the motherboard is the base that all of those chips rest on. So the cytoplasm, I jiggle because it's like a jiggly jelly-like fluid, holds all the organelles in place, just like the cell phone motherboard holds all the chips in place. Next, we have the mitochondria, okay, the mitochondria. And a lot of people know about the mitochondria because they give the cell energy. And the way that they do that is they convert glucose, the monosaccharide we learned about last year, into an even more useful form of energy for us called ATP. So the mitochondria give all the energy to the cell, and that's why we compare it to your cell phone charger, because in order to get energy to your cell phone and to get your cell phone to work, you need to charge it up using the charger. And just like the charger gives your phone energy, mitochondria gives your cell energy. Then we have the nucleus. All right, so everyone point to your brain for the nucleus. The reason why I point to the brain is because the nucleus contains the genetic information for your cell and also makes up the command center of the cell. This is like the boss of the cell. So I also point to my brain because if you remember in last semester, the hand motion for nucleic acids was kind of coming out of the brain. That's because the nucleus contains our DNA, one of our nucleic acids, which give the instructions for the cell and what its job is. And it's also the command center of the cell. So in your cell phone, you can compare the nucleus to the SIM card. As you know, almost all the information on your cell phone is stored on the SIM card. And if anything ever happens to your phone, if you have the SIM card, you can put it in a new phone and it will retain all of that information, that material. Whereas if you lose the SIM card, then you basically have to start from scratch. So we've got the nucleus, and this is the command center of the cell. That's where all of the important instructions are located. Then we have the nucleolus, and that is found inside the nucleus and is used to make ribosomes. All right, and we're going to compare this to the graphic processing unit part of your cell phone. This is the part of your cell phone that allows you to see the graphics and see what's going on the screen. And this will make a little bit more sense in a little bit. So let's review what we've done so far. We have the cell membrane, which controls what comes in and out. We have the cytoskeleton, which protects and gives shape to the cell. We have the cytoplasm, which holds the organelles in place. We have the mitochondria, which gives energy to the cell. We have the nucleus, which contains the genetic material and makes up the command center. And then we have the nucleolus, which makes ribosomes. Now, next up we have the ribosome, okay? And we are now coming to the part of the cell organelles that help to fulfill the main job of the cell. One of the main jobs of the cell is to make and send proteins, because proteins are kind of like messengers both within a cell, and if they send the protein out of the cell, that protein can send a message to another part of the cell. So all of the organelles we're going to talk about now are used to help make proteins, which are like the cell messengers. So ribosome, I'm doing the muscle for ribosome because they make proteins, and this is supposed to remind you of the move for proteins that we learned last semester. And so ribosomes are kind of like the keyboard on your screen, because you use this keyboard to make messages, right? Just like ribosomes make proteins, which are the cell messages, you use your keyboard to write text messages. After the ribosomes have made the proteins, they spend some time on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, or the rough ER. And this is the move for the rough ER. And why do I have a bunch of dots? Well, that's because the rough ER contains the ribosomes. That's what these dots are supposed to represent. And so on the rough ER, the ribosomes continue making their proteins, kind of finishing them up, and the rough ER helps them do that. And that can be compared on your cell phone to the touchscreen sensors, because if you had the keyboard but you didn't have any sensors, it wouldn't be able to tell what message you're making. So the touchscreen helps the keyboard write your message, just like the rough ER helps the ribosomes to make the proteins. Next, we have the Golgi Apparatus, and this one is kind of like the mailman of the cell. It helps to process, sort, and deliver proteins. So once they've been finalized and get finished being made, the Golgi Apparatus is going to process them, sort them, and start sending them to where they need to go, whether that's inside this cell or if they need to move to another cell, it's going to send them out. And so this is kind of like the messaging app on your phone, because that app is responsible for sorting the messages, like who you get messages from, delivering new messages, and then processing the messages that you do receive so that it tells you, hey, you got a message. So the Golgi Apparatus, I kind of do this because it's like sending a message. That's what it's doing, all right? So they start out getting made in the ribosomes, those proteins. Then they get finished in the rough ER, and then the Golgi Apparatus starts shipping them out to where they need to go, packaging and shipping, okay? Next, we have the vacuole, okay? The vacuole is the excess storage center. This organelle is used to store excess materials in the cell, usually food and water. And we saw how in plant cells, the vacuoles tend to be really big because they need to store a lot of water. In animal cells, they're a little bit smaller. But they could be, you could also think of them like the trunk of a car. They're used to store the extra stuff. And so for your cell phone, if you run out of space, I don't know if cell phones really do this as much anymore, but it used to be back in the day, you could add a memory card and store extra stuff on your phone. Or maybe you want to transfer it to the memory card and then delete it from your phone, and then the memory card holds the extra stuff. So that's kind of like what the vacuole does for the cell. So that's the vacuole. It's holding a lot of stuff. Then we have the smooth ER, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, okay? This is an interesting organelle because depending on the type of cell, it has different jobs. So one of its jobs is to make lipids, which we learned about last semester. In liver cells, however, the smooth ER has an important job of detoxifying the cells after you drink, say, alcohol, or if you were to have any drugs in your system. The smooth ER helps to detoxify that cell and keep it healthy and allow it to continue working. So we kind of compare the smooth ER to the operating system. Some of you may have Apple phones, some of you may have Android phones, and depending on which one you have, your phone's going to do some different jobs. And so the smooth ER is kind of like that. It has a lot of different jobs that can depend on the type of cell. But the two main ones are making lipids, synthesizing lipids, and also detoxifying the cells. Next, we have the vesicle, and I have a driving the car motion here because the vesicle is responsible for holding and transporting materials to other parts of the same cell or outside of the cell to a new cell. So once we have, say, a protein or something we want to send out of the cell, maybe we want to get rid of some water, send it somewhere else, get rid of some food, send it somewhere else. We're going to package it up in a vesicle in the Golgi apparatus, and then we're going to put it in the vesicle, and the vesicle is going to transport it to its next location, or kind of like drive it to the next location. And so these are kind of like apps, because your apps contain information from your phone, but then they allow you to upload it and send it to other places, maybe even other people's phones. So that's why the apps on your phone are like the vesicle. Next, we have the lysosome, all right? The lysosome, and the reason why I'm doing this motion is because they are kind of like the trash cans of the cell. They break down the waste and they get rid of it. So anytime there's old cell parts that are kind of not really working super well, or anything in the cell that's not supposed to be there, the lysosome helps breaks it down and get rid of it. So that's kind of like the delete button on your phone. And then we have this special organelle called the centriole. Okay, the centriole. And this one we talked a little bit about when we learned the difference between plant and animal cells. These are found only in animal cells, and they are involved in mitosis, so copying of the cell. And so that's basically like the copy function on your phone. If you want to copy something, you can do that with the copy function, just like when you're trying to make a copy of a cell, you could use the centriole to help you out with that. And then plant cells have a chloroplast. And these are only found in plant cells, not animal cells. So the rest of these organelles, besides the centriole and the chloroplast, are found in both plants and animals, but chloroplasts only found in plants. And the chloroplasts are like the battery of your cell. They take energy from the sun and convert it into glucose, which is energy the plant cells can use, and also ultimately we could use eventually if we consume a plant. But the chloroplast is kind of like the battery because it takes energy from elsewhere and converts it to power the plant cell. And so just to go back and review one more time, all of them together, we have the cell membrane, controls what goes in and out. We have the cytoskeleton, which protects and gives shape to the cell. We have the cytoplasm, which holds the organelles in place, very jiggly. We have the mitochondria, which powers the cell and gives it energy. We have the nucleus, which contains the genetic information and is the command center of the cell. The nucleolus, which makes the ribosomes. We have the ribosomes, which make proteins. We have the rough ER, which contains ribosomes and helps them to make more proteins. We have the Golgi apparatus, which processes, sorts, and delivers the proteins. The vacuole that stores excess materials. The smooth ER, who has different jobs but can be used to make lipids and detoxify the cell. The vesicle, which holds and transports materials inside and out of the cell. The lysosome, which breaks down and gets rid of waste. The centriole, which is used for animal cell copying. and the chloroplast, which is used by plants to take energy from the sun and make glucose, aka the process of photosynthesis. So hopefully that was really helpful and you got a chance to understand all of the different organelles. And I will see you later.